The vote lasted 7 days. Every human colony cast its decision. Every space station, every research base, every ship floating in the dark between stars. From the crowded cities of Earth to the lonely outpost on the edge of known space, humanity spoke with one voice. The result was announced on a quiet Tuesday morning in the Great Hall of the United Human Assembly. Secretary General Susan Price stood at the podium, her face showing no emotion as she read the numbers. 94% in favor, 6% against. The Exodus Protocol has been approved. The hall was silent. No cheers, no tears. Just a heavy, tired acceptance of what had to be done. 3,000 light-years away, Admiral Kevin Moore received the news on Luna Base, the military headquarters hidden on the dark side of Earth's moon. He had been expecting this result. In truth, he had been preparing for it for the past 5 years. His office was small and plain, filled with star maps and technical documents. A photograph of his late wife sat on his desk, her smile frozen in time. She had died 10 years ago during a Zorath attack on a human medical ship. The Zorath had claimed it was an accident. They had never apologized. Kevin pressed a button on his communicator. "Bring in the science team. It's time." Dr. Linda Scott was the first to enter, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was the greatest astrophysicist humanity had ever produced, and she carried the answer to humanity's future in a small data chip. "Show me," Kevin said. Linda inserted the chip into the holographic projector. A map of the galaxy appeared, filled with colored dots representing human colonies, alien territories, and the vast empty spaces between them. Then the image zoomed out, far beyond the edges of the known galaxy, to a point of light at the very edge of the display. "A natural wormhole," Linda explained. "We discovered it 18 months ago. It's stable, large enough for our biggest ships, and it leads to a place no one has ever seen before." "Where does it go?" Linda touched the display, and the image changed to show a new galaxy. Spiral arms of stars stretched across the screen, beautiful and untouched. 2 million light-years from here, a virgin galaxy. No intelligent life that we can detect. No one to hate us, no one to hurt us. Just empty worlds waiting to be filled. Kevin studied the image for a long moment. 2 million light-years. It seemed impossible. But humanity had done impossible things before. How long would the journey take? 6 months with the new fold drives. We've been developing them in secret for the past decade. They're faster than anything the other species have ever seen. Chief Engineer Gary Hill stepped forward. He was a big man with rough hands and honest eyes, the kind of man who built things that worked and said what he meant. "There's another matter, Admiral, the technology lockout." Kevin nodded slowly. He knew what Gary was going to say, but he needed to hear it spoken aloud. "Every piece of human technology in this galaxy is connected to our systems," Gary said. "Medical equipment in alien hospitals, power generators in alien cities, defense platforms protecting alien worlds, terraforming engines that keep alien planets alive. We built it all. We maintain it all. And when we leave, we can shut it all down." The room was quiet. Everyone understood what those words meant. "They'll die," said a young officer named Amy Chun, her voice barely a whisper. "Millions of them. Maybe billions." Gary's face was hard as stone. They should have thought of that before they started killing our people. Before they insulted us and attacked us and treated us like dirt under their feet. We gave them everything, and they gave us nothing but hatred. Kevin raised his hand for silence. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "I've served humanity for 40 years, he said. "I've watched us save species that were facing extinction. I've watched us rebuild worlds that were destroyed by war and disaster. I've watched us give and give and give until we had almost nothing left to give." He turned back to face his team, and I've watched them take everything we offered and spit in our faces. I've buried friends who died helping people who hated them. I've written letters to families telling them their loved ones were murdered by the very aliens they were trying to save. His voice grew quiet but firm. No more. We're done being the galaxy's servants. We're done being grateful for the privilege of being hated. We're going to find a new home where our children can live without fear, and we're going to leave this ungrateful galaxy to face the consequences of its choices. The preparations began that very day on Earth. Factories that had been building ships for alien customers quietly changed their production lines. Now they built arc ships and colony vessels, transports and supply carriers. Everything humanity would need to start over in a new galaxy. On Mars, the great libraries began copying their archives. Every book, every recording, every piece of art that humanity had ever created was backed up and prepared for transport. Nothing would be left behind. On the farming worlds, seeds were gathered and stored. Genetic samples from every crop, every animal, every plant that humanity had brought to the stars were carefully preserved. The new galaxy would bloom with the life of old Earth, and on the military bases, engineers worked day and night on the shutdown codes. Every piece of technology that humanity had shared with the galaxy was cataloged and tagged. When the time came, a single signal would turn off everything that kept alien civilization running. Patricia long received her evacuation orders on a cool autumn morning. She read them twice, then walked out to her wheat fields one last time. The grain was almost ready for harvest, but she would not be there to collect it. She thought about the aliens, who would go hungry when this food never arrived. She thought about the children who would cry for bread that would never come. Then she thought about her brother, who had died on a human-aid ship that the Mechari had destroyed for flying too close to their border. He had been carrying medicine to a Mechari colony that was suffering from disease. Patricia folded the orders and put them in her pocket. She did not look back as she walked away from the fields. The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years, they had answered that call with open hands and generous hearts. They had spread across the galaxy not as conquerors, but as helpers, as healers, as friends to any species that needed them. Captain Daniel Cole stood at the observation window of his starship, the Wanderer's Hope, watching the blue and green planet below. This was Valori Prime, the homeworld of the crystalline beings who had once begged humanity for salvation. 50 years ago, a terrible plague had swept through their cities. Their doctors had no answers. Their scientists had no cure. Millions were dying every day, and the Valori faced extinction. Humanity had answered their desperate call. Human doctors had worked for months without sleep. Human scientists had shared their most advanced medical knowledge. Human ships had carried supplies across the vast emptiness of space. And in the end, humanity had saved them. The plague was defeated. The Valori lived. Daniel remembered reading about those days in his history classes. He had felt proud of his species then, proud of what humans could accomplish when they worked together for a good cause. But that pride had turned bitter over the years. His communicator buzzed softly. Lieutenant Laura West's voice came through, tired and heavy with bad news. "Captain, you need to see the council broadcast. It's happening again." Daniel walked to the main deck where his crew had gathered around the central screen. The Valori ambassador was speaking to the Galactic Council, his crystal face catching the light as he moved. His voice was cold and sharp like breaking glass. "Humans are a pestilence upon our galaxy," the ambassador declared. "They spread into our territories without permission. They insert themselves into our affairs without invitation. They act as if they own the stars themselves." A murmur of agreement rippled through the council chamber. Representatives from a dozen species nodded their heads. Some smiled with cruel satisfaction. Daniel felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. The Kethran delegate spoke next, his rocky face showing no emotion. The humans have become too bold. They build their stations near our mining colonies. They claim they are helping, but we know the truth. They want our resources. They want our worlds. Laura turned to look at Daniel. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears. We rebuilt those mining colonies for them, sir. After the collapse, we saved 12,000 Kethran workers. We asked for nothing in return. I know, Daniel said quietly. I know. The broadcast continued for another hour. Species after species stood to complain about humanity. The Zorath accused humans of cultural contamination. The Mechari claimed humans were stealing their technology. The Dreth demanded that human ships be banned from their space. Not one of them mentioned the help humanity had given. Not one of them spoke of the lives saved, the worlds rebuilt, the futures made possible by human sacrifice. When the broadcast finally ended, Daniel dismissed his crew. He needed time alone to think. Back on Earth, the sun was setting over the city of New Geneva, where the United Human Assembly held its sessions. Secretary General Susan Price stood at the great window of her office, watching the orange light paint the ancient mountains gold. Her assistant, a young man named Peter Grant, entered with a tablet in his hands. His face was pale. The attack on Kepler-7 is confirmed, he said. 32 dead, 15 wounded. The Kethran warship fired without warning. They say we were encroaching on their mining rights. Susan closed her eyes. The colony on Kepler-7 had been established with full galactic approval. Every document had been signed. Every protocol had been followed. And still, the Kethran had murdered innocent people. How many attacks this year, Peter? 17, ma'am. 243 dead. 512 wounded. Susan turned from the window. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with a cold fire that Peter had never seen before. Call an emergency session of the Assembly. Contact every human colony, every station, every ship. I want a full vote within the week. Peter hesitated. A vote on what, ma'am? Susan sat down at her desk and began typing on her personal terminal. On whether we should continue giving our gifts to those who hate us for giving them. The news spread across human space like wildfire. On farming worlds and mining stations, on research bases and military outposts, people gathered to discuss what they had heard. The question was simple, but heavy with meaning. Should humanity stay in a galaxy that did not want them? On the agricultural planet of New Kansas, a woman named Patricia Long sat on her porch as the twin suns set behind the hills. Her wheat fields stretched to the horizon, golden and beautiful in the fading light. Those fields fed 3 alien species. Her grain ships traveled to a dozen worlds every month, preventing famines and filling empty bellies. Not once in 20 years had she received a single word of thanks. Her neighbor, an old man named Harold Webb, walked up the dusty path to her house. He carried a bottle of homemade whiskey and 2 glasses. You heard the news? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. I heard. Harold poured 2 drinks and handed one to Patricia. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. I've been farming this land for 40 years, Harold said finally. My father farmed it before me. We fed billions of aliens who would spit on us if they saw us in the street. And I've been thinking, Patricia, I've been thinking that maybe it's time to stop. Patricia raised her glass and looked at the amber liquid inside. She thought of all the years she had worked this soil, all the harvests she had sent to ungrateful mouths, all the times she had smiled and said nothing when alien traders insulted her to her face. Maybe it is, she said. They drank together as the night grew deep and the stars wheeled overhead. Tomorrow, the vote would begin. Tomorrow, humanity would decide its future. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Patricia Long already knew what that decision would be. She had seen it in the eyes of every human she had met in the past 10 years. Tired eyes. Hurt eyes. Eyes that had finally stopped hoping for kindness in return for kindness given. The galaxy did not want humanity. Perhaps it was time to grant that wish. The galaxy noticed nothing, while the great alien councils debated new sanctions against humanity, while Valori merchants raised taxes on human goods, while Kethran warships conducted threatening patrols near human borders. The exodus had already begun. It moved quietly, like water flowing beneath ice, invisible to those who were not looking. Captain Daniel Cole guided his ship, the Wanderer's Hope, through the Valori trade lanes one last time. His cargo hold was filled with crates marked as agricultural equipment, but the crates held something far more precious. Seeds from every human farming world. Genetic samples from animals and plants that would be needed in a new home. Cultural treasures that could never be replaced. A Valori patrol ship hailed him as he passed their checkpoint. Human vessel, state your business. Daniel smiled at the screen, his voice calm and friendly. Delivering farm supplies to the outer colonies. Just routine trade. The Valori officer looked at him with cold, suspicious eyes. Proceed. But know that your kind is being watched. Any violations will be punished severely. Of course. Thank you for your kindness. The patrol ship moved away, and Daniel allowed himself a small laugh. The Valori were so focused on controlling humanity that they could not see what was happening right in front of them. On the planet Kethra Minor, Chief Engineer Gary Hill was completing his most important project. For 20 years, he had helped maintain the massive power generators that kept the Kethran mining operations running. Now, he was making sure that those generators would fail the moment humanity departed. The shutdown codes are installed, his assistant reported. A young woman named Sarah Quinn, who had lost her father to a Kethran attack 3 years earlier. Every generator, every pump, every safety system. One signal and it all goes dark. Gary nodded. And they'll never suspect. They think we're just doing routine maintenance. They never bothered to learn how any of it works. They just expected us to keep fixing it forever. Their mistake. That night, Gary and Sarah boarded the transport ship bound for the gathering point. They left behind 20 years of work, knowing that it would all be destroyed when they were gone. Neither of them felt sorry. Ambassador Christopher Lane attended the final Galactic Summit with a smile that never touched his eyes. He sat in the Great Council chamber, surrounded by delegates from 100 species, and listened to them insult his people for 6 straight hours. The Zorith delegate was particularly cruel. Her name was Elder Trika, and she had spent decades pushing for restrictions on human expansion. Now she stood before the council, her 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Humans must learn their place, she declared. You are newcomers to this galaxy. You do not have the right to spread as you please. You do not have the right to involve yourselves in affairs that do not concern you. Christopher nodded politely. We understand completely, Elder. Humanity has heard your concerns. Good. Then you will accept the new travel restrictions? We will consider them carefully. Trika smiled, believing she had won a great victory. She did not notice the way Christopher's hands were folded in his lap, relaxed and calm. She did not see the peace in his eyes, the peace of a man who knew a secret that his enemies could not imagine. In 6 hours, Christopher would board the last diplomatic shuttle, leaving galactic space forever. He would never see Elder Trika again. He would never have to smile while aliens insulted his people. He would be free. Thank you for your wisdom, Elder, he said. Humanity will remember this day. On the hospital station orbiting Valori Prime, Dr. Nancy Park worked her final shift. She had been healing alien patients for 15 years, performing surgeries that no alien doctor could manage. saving lives that would have been lost without human medicine. Today, she was operating on a young Valori child named Keth. He had been born with a defective heart, a condition that was always fatal without treatment. His mother brought him to the human hospital as a last hope, swallowing her pride to beg the species she had been taught to hate. Nancy worked for 7 hours, her hands steady and sure. She repaired the tiny heart, stitched together the damaged vessels, and brought the child back from the edge of death. When she finally stepped out of the operating room, her surgical gown was soaked with sweat, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. The child's mother was waiting in the hallway. Nancy approached her with a tired smile. "He'll live. He'll grow up strong and healthy. You can have a normal life now." The mother looked at her for a long moment. Her crystal face showed no emotion, no gratitude, no relief. Just the cold, blank expression that Nancy had seen on so many alien faces over the years. Without a word, the mother pushed past her and walked to her son's room. She did not say thank you. She did not meet Nancy's eyes. She simply took what humanity had given and walked away as if it meant nothing. Nancy stood alone in the empty hallway. She thought about all the patients she had saved, all the lives she had given back to people who would never acknowledge her sacrifice, all the years she had spent healing those who hated her. She removed her medical coat and laid it on a nearby chair. She took off her identification badge and placed it on top of the coat. Then she walked to the shuttle bay and boarded the transport that would take her to the gathering point. She did not look back at the hospital. She did not think about the patients who would die without her. She had given everything she had to give, and she had received nothing in return. It was time to find a place where her gifts would be valued. The preparations continued for 3 more months. Ships loaded with supplies and people moved quietly through space, avoiding alien patrols and slipping through gaps in their surveillance networks. Libraries were emptied, factories were stripped, and research stations were cleared of everything useful. The aliens saw only what they expected to see: humans going about their business, quiet and obedient as always. They did not notice that the trade ships were not returning. They did not realize that the scientists were disappearing. They did not understand that every day, more and more humans were vanishing from the galaxy. By the time they finally noticed, it would be far too late. They left at midnight, Galactic Standard Time. The gathering point was a region of empty space, far from any inhabited world, a place where no alien sensors could reach. And there, hidden in the darkness between stars, the greatest fleet in human history had assembled. 10,000 ships floated in perfect formation. Massive arc ships, each one carrying millions of sleeping colonists in cryogenic chambers. Research vessels loaded with the sum of all human knowledge. Hospital ships equipped to handle any medical emergency. Construction fleets ready to build new cities on new worlds. Military escorts prepared to defend the convoy against any threat. 50 billion souls. The entire human civilization, packed into metal shells and ready to cross the void. Admiral Kevin Moore stood on the bridge of the flagship. The new dawn. He was an old man now, worn down by years of service and loss. But his eyes were sharp, and his voice was steady as he addressed the fleet. "This is Admiral Moore. All ships. Report status." One by one, the captains responded. Every vessel was ready. Every system was functioning. Every person was accounted for. Kevin nodded slowly. "Then let us begin. Navigation, plot our course. Communications, maintain radio silence. We leave no trace. We make no sound. We simply vanish." The great fleet began to move, sliding through the darkness like ghosts. The wormhole waited for them at the edge of known space, a swirling doorway to a new beginning. It would take them 6 months to reach it, 6 months of careful travel through hostile territory. But they would make it. Kevin was certain of that. Humanity had survived worse odds before. Commander Ruth Adams piloted the rear guard vessel, a fast attack ship called the Quiet Dawn. Her job was to watch for pursuit, to protect the fleet from any alien forces that might try to stop them. So far, her sensors showed nothing but empty space. She sat alone on her bridge, watching the stars drift past her windows. Each one was a memory. The blue giant where she had fought her first battle. The red dwarf where she had fallen in love with her husband, who now slept in a cryogenic pod in the cargo bay. The yellow sun that had warmed the planet where her children had been born. She was leaving all of it behind. Any contacts? She asked her sensor officer. Nothing, Commander. The alien fleets are still docked at their bases. No one is looking for us. Ruth allowed herself a small smile. The aliens had spent 300 years underestimating humanity. They thought humans were simple creatures, useful for labor and technology, but not capable of anything truly bold. They could not imagine that humanity would simply walk away. Their lack of imagination would be their downfall. The journey to the wormhole took exactly 6 months. During that time, not a single alien ship detected them. Not a single patrol crossed their path. The galaxy slept peacefully, unaware that its servants were escaping on the final day. Kevin Moore stood at the observation window of the new dawn and watched the wormhole grow larger in the distance. It was beautiful, a spiral of blue and white light spinning slowly against a backdrop of stars. Beyond it lay a new galaxy, a new home, a new future for humanity. All ships, this is Admiral Moore. We have reached the threshold. Prepare to cross. One by one, the ARC ships entered the wormhole. Each one carried precious cargo. Families, children, elderly, the sick, the healthy, the dreamers and builders who would create a new civilization. They disappeared into the light, traveling 2 million light years in a single heartbeat. The research vessels followed, then the hospital ships, then the construction fleets. Each departure brought humanity closer to freedom. At last, only the military escort remained. Commander Ruth Adams watched the final civilian ship vanish into the wormhole, then turned to her crew. Our turn. Everyone, make sure you've said your goodbyes to this galaxy. We won't be coming back. She thought of her parents, who had died in a Mechari attack 20 years ago. She thought of her sister, who had been killed by Kethran raiders while delivering food to a starving colony. She thought of all the friends she had lost, all the funerals she had attended, all the tears she had shed for people who had died trying to help those who hated them. She felt no sadness as her ship approached the wormhole. Only relief. The last vessel to cross was the Quiet Dawn. Ruth took the controls herself, guiding her ship toward the swirling light. The stars of the old galaxy sparkled one last time in her windows, cold and distant and full of bitter memories. Goodbye, she whispered to no one in particular. I hope you find what you were looking for. The wormhole swallowed her ship, and humanity was gone. Behind them, in the sudden silence of empty space, a small relay station activated. It was a simple device, hidden inside an asteroid at the edge of galactic civilization. For 6 months, it had waited patiently for this moment. Now it received its final command. The station broadcast a single signal, short and powerful, reaching every piece of human technology in the galaxy. Medical equipment in alien hospitals, power generators in alien cities, communication networks that connected alien worlds, defense platforms that protected alien borders, terraforming engines that kept alien planets alive. All of it, every single piece of it, had been designed with a hidden command buried deep in its programming. A command that could only be activated by human authority. A command that the aliens had never known existed. Shut down. The signal spread at the speed of light, washing over star system after star system. And as it passed, the technology died. Screens went dark. Engines fell silent. Life support systems stopped breathing. In hospitals across the galaxy, patients who depended on human medicine began to die. In cities that relied on human power, the lights went out and the cold crept in. The galaxy that had hated humanity finally got what it had always claimed to want. A universe without humans. The stars continued to burn, but the worlds beneath them had never felt so cold. The screening began at dawn. On Valori Prime. The crystalline beings woke to find their world dying around them. The medical equipment that kept millions of their elderly alive had stopped working. The atmospheric processes that maintained their delicate crystal cities had fallen silent. The communication networks that connected their civilization had gone dark. Ambassador Kethrol, the same official who had called humans a pestilence before the Galactic Council, ran through the streets of the capital city in his sleeping robes. His crystal skin was cracked with panic, his forearms waving wildly as he searched for anyone, who could explain what had happened. "The humans," he gasped to a passing guard. "Find the humans. They must fix this." The guard stared at him with empty eyes. "There are no humans, Ambassador. They are all gone. Every single one." "Gone? What do you mean gone? Where did they go?" But the guard had no answer. No one did. On Kethrim Prime, the great mining platforms that extracted precious metals from the planet's toxic depths began to drift. Without human guidance systems, they crashed into each other one by one, creating explosions that lit up the polluted sky. The mining operations that had made the Kethran wealthy and powerful were destroyed in a single night. Elder Grathkon stood at his window and watched his empire burn. He had spent 40 years demanding that humans be pushed out of Kethran space. He had signed the orders that killed human traders and destroyed human ships. He had believed that his people were strong enough to survive without human help. He had been wrong. "How long until we can repair the damage?" he asked his advisors. They looked at each other with fear in their eyes. "We do not know how, Elder. The humans built everything. They maintained everything. We never learned how it worked. Then learn now. It would take decades, Elder, perhaps centuries. And without the mining platforms, we have no resources to build new ones." Grathkan sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in his long life, he felt truly afraid. On the Zorath homeworld, the agricultural domes that provided food for billions began to fail. The terraforming engines that had transformed their barren planet into a paradise had been a human gift, given freely when the Zorath were starving and desperate. Now that gift was taken away, and the cold, dead soil beneath the domes could not support life. Elder Trika, who had lectured the human ambassador about knowing his place, stood in a dying greenhouse and watched the plants wither around her. The air was already growing thin and cold. Within a year, the domes would collapse entirely. Within 5 years, her people would be fighting over scraps. "We must find the humans," she said to her council. "We must bring them back." "How, Elder?" "We do not know where they went. Our sensors detected nothing. It was as if they simply vanished from existence." "Then search. Send every ship we have. Find them and beg them to return." But even as she gave the order, Trika knew it was hopeless. The humans had not simply left. They had erased themselves from the galaxy, taking every trace of their presence with them. There were no clues to follow, no trails to track. They were gone, and they were never coming back. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 3 days after the departure. The great chamber that had once echoed with insults against humanity was now filled with frightened voices and desperate pleas. "The humans must return," the Mechari delegate demanded. "They cannot simply abandon us." "We did not abandon them," the Valori ambassador replied, his voice weak and trembling. "They abandoned us. and they took everything with them. But why? What did we do to deserve this? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to speak it aloud. Finally, an old Dreth elder rose from his seat. He was nearly 1,000 years old, ancient even by Dreth standards. And he had watched humanity from the moment they first ventured into space. "I will tell you what we did," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We took their gifts and called them worthless. We accepted their help and insulted them for giving it. We killed their people and blamed them for dying. We hated them for being different, for being kind, for being better than we wanted to admit." He looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of the delegates. And now they are gone. They found a new home where they will not be hated. A new galaxy where their children can grow up without fear. And we are left here, alone in the dark, surrounded by machines we cannot operate and facing problems we cannot solve. What do? Someone whispered. The old Dreth shook his head slowly. "We learn to live without them. If we can." A communication screen flickered to life on the main wall of the chamber. A human face appeared, young and calm, with eyes that held neither anger nor hatred. His name was Dennis Webb, and he had been the last human in galactic space. Monitoring from a hidden relay station. This was his final message, recorded hours before his departure. "To the species of the galaxy," he began, "for 300 years, humanity asked only for simple things: friendship, respect, the acknowledgement that our help had value. We gave you our medicine, our technology, our knowledge, our lives. We asked for nothing in return, except to be treated with basic dignity." He paused, and for a moment, sadness flickered across his face. "You gave us hatred instead. You gave us violence and scorn and death. So now we give you what you always claimed to want: a galaxy without humans. We hope it brings you everything you deserve." The transmission ended. 200 years later, a Valori exploration ship detected strange signals at the edge of the galaxy. They were faint and distant, coming from somewhere impossibly far away. But they were unmistakably human. The ship's captain traced the signals to their source, beyond the collapsed wormhole that had once connected the galaxies. The signals painted a picture of thriving colonies and advanced cities, of a civilization that had not merely survived, but flourished beyond anything the old galaxy had ever achieved. He filed his report with a heavy heart. "They found paradise," he wrote, "and we cannot follow. The passage is closed forever. Humanity is lost to us." He stared at the stars for a long time before adding a final sentence. "We taught them that kindness was weakness. Now they have taught us the true price of cruelty." The report was archived and forgotten. The galaxy continued to struggle, slowly rebuilding what the humans had built, slowly learning what the humans had known. But they never forgot the lesson they had learned: kindness, once rejected, does not return. And some doors, once closed, stay closed forever.